Welcome to Absolute Trust Talk with your host, Kirsten Howe. Absolute Trust Talk brings you tips, tools, advice, and interviews to help you build a reliable knowledge base on estate planning, business, and finance to start preparing for your future today.
Hello, and welcome to Absolute Trust Talk. This is our podcast at Absolute Trust Counsel, and I'm Kirsten Howe. I'm the managing attorney at Absolute Trust Counsel. Jessica Colbert, one of our associate attorneys, is here today with me, and we're going to do one of our, or maybe my, favorite things that we do on the podcast is we're going to talk about a celebrity estate and then a celebrity estate plan. And this is a very timely episode. We're talking about Gene Hackman's estate, and just over the weekend, some information about his estate came out, and I'm excited to talk about this for a bunch of reasons, one of which is I absolutely love Gene Hackman. His movie, The Conversation, is on probably my top 5 list of greatest movies of all time. And his death happened in kind of an unusual way, a mysterious way for a number of days. And I think a lot of us, myself included, were just kind of glued to CNN, Entertainment Tonight, whatever we could find out about his death until we found it out. So for a variety of reasons, this is very interesting to me. And it's also going to be educational for our audience. So it's a legitimate episode, but we do get to talk about celebrity estate plans. So yay, I'm very excited. I'm just going to give our typical or common caveats when we have an episode like this. We're going to be talking about a death that happened in New Mexico, and that's where he lived. We are not New Mexico attorneys. We do not know New Mexico law. So we might be saying some things that are really based on California law, and we'll be drawing distinctions, but we don't know. You know, if it's varying from New Mexico law, we really don't know. All we can do is speculate. The other thing is there are estate planning documents in Gene Hackman's case, but we have not been able to obtain or see copies of Mr. Hackman's estate planning documents. There's at least one news source that claims to have seen them and to have copies. And some of what we're going to be talking about is based on what they say they are reading in his documents. Okay. We have been able to look at the relevant court website so we can see what actually has been filed and transpired in the court. Jessica, let's start talking about that, what we can see from the court records. These are official records in New Mexico in Santa Fe County.
Yes, so we are able to see that on March 6th, there were several documents filed in probate court in Santa Fe County. Like you said, that's where Gene Hackman had lived. And on March 6th, an application for informal probate of will and appointment of personal representative was filed. An order for informal probate of will and appointment of representative was filed. Acceptance of appointment as personal representative, letters testamentary, and of course, Gene Hackman's will were all filed on that day. Filed the very next day was a notice of appointment of personal representative and a notice to creditors.
Okay. And the person who did all of this, the petitioner, the person who caused all these things to be filed was Julia Peters. She is also listed in the court records as the personal representative. What I have read, not in the court records, is that in Gene Hackman's will, he named his wife, Betsy, as his personal representative. There was an alternate personal representative who also has predeceased Mr. Hackman, and that this Julia Peters was the next named personal representative. And so we're seeing that she was aware that her two, higher ups wouldn't be able to do the job because they both were dead. And so she went ahead and filed the petition. So what we're seeing in the court record is, I think, different from what we would see in California. Jessica, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the records we're seeing are for an informal probate of will, and we don't necessarily know what that is. A little bit of our own research is showing that for an informal probate of will, the estate has to be less than $50,000 to qualify. The personal representative, so Julia Peters, would be appointed immediately, and the letters would also be issued immediately in this informal small estate situation. The notice to heirs would go out after the appointment of the personal representative, which is different than what we see here because notice would go out before the appointment actually happened.
So it's different from what we do in California in a number of ways. First of all, we don't have anything called an informal probate of will. You either have a probate or you don't. There either is a court process or there isn't. In California, we do have a small estate procedure, but it doesn't involve a court except in very, very, very particular circumstances. So this is an interesting, it's a process. She filed to be appointed the personal representative, but because she's asking for an informal probate, it appears that as far as she knows, the estate is actually less than $50,000. And it looks like in this informal process, they just go ahead and issue it right away. You get your letters right away, and she's appointed right away, which is in a California probate, you got to wait. Yeah. You got to get a hearing. You got to go and talk to the judge and get your appointment. Okay, so that's what we can see and kind of deduce from what has been filed in the court. Then the other source of information we have about Mr. Hackman's estate is what we read in the news. And I'm talking about like USA Today, Entertainment Tonight, these kinds of sources where you can actually see what they're saying. And one of the sources, and now I can't remember which, said that they actually got a copy of the will. And we tried to get the copy of the will, but I think you actually have to go down to the courthouse to get it. We were not able to get that online, and we're not in Santa Fe. And I'd love to go there, but not happening this week. Okay, so what we have read in the news, Jessica, you want to start by some of these things?
Yes. So one headline we've been seeing is, Gene Hackman's will leaves everything to his wife. His children are not included. Drama. His children are cut out. They're not getting anything. But actually, what we're seeing is that the will appears to be a pour-over will. And if you tune in somewhat regularly to our show, you know what that is. It's a will that pours everything over to the trust. So actually, what the pour-over will is saying is that everything goes to Gene Hackman's wife as trustee of the Gene Hackman Living Trust, not to her individually, to her as trustee. And we don't know what the trust says. The trust very well may say that his children receive something, but we don't know because we can't see that.
Yeah, and we would not expect to see any kind of disposition in a true pour-over will. The purpose of the pour-over will is just to say, when I die, I leave everything to my trust. And it's in the trust document, which is not filed. It's not a public record. It's a private document. That's where Gene Hackman would have said who gets what on my death. We don't know. It might be that he left everything to her, and then on her death, everything would go somewhere else, including to his 3 children. He might have left some to his kids, some to her. We don't know. But you can't tell anything really from what this appears to be, which is a pour-over will. Another headline, news people need to make money. So then how they make money is they get people to read their news. And so they like to jazz things up a little bit. Another headline or sub-headline that we've seen is that the sole beneficiary of his will is his wife, and she's predeceased him. That was established last week. The medical examiner established that Betsy Akawa Hackman died before Gene. Now that the sole beneficiary has deceased, the whole thing's going to have to go through probate, and there's going to have to be laws of intestacy applied. And actually, that's not what we're reading. According to the documents that we've read about, we are going to have to read the trust to know what happens now that we know that his wife predeceased him. And I'm just going to say it is almost 100% a sure thing that Mr. Hackman's trust has a plan for what happens if his primary beneficiary, his wife, predeceases him. That would just be unheard of poor estate planning to not ask that question. That's what we do. That's what estate planners do. Like half of our meetings are, well, what if this happens? And so the first question you're going to ask, okay, that's great. We leave everything to your wife. What if she dies before you? You ask that question. I guarantee you it's written in that document. Okay. So what else have we gleaned from?
Yeah, it appears that there is another trust, the Gene Trust, which was created in September 1994. So the will refers to this trust, and it looks like Gene Hackman had a power of appointment over the assets of that trust, which he exercised in his will. So what that means is he had the power to appoint in his will what he wanted to happen to those trust assets upon his death. And it looks like he exercised that. We don't know what those assets are, but that's pretty standard, nothing too exciting or dramatic there, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think that the name of that other trust is you might say GEBE. It's GEBE. So to me, that looks like a portmanteau, like a combination of their two first names, Gene and Betsy. I don't know, pure speculation. But he appears to have exercised his power of appointment over whatever that trust owns, saying, I also leave that to the Gene Hackman Living Trust or Revocable Living Trust. And so really it comes down to, what does that Gene Hackman Living Trust say? And nobody knows. Well, there are people who know. You and I don't know. USA Today, I suspect, doesn't know. But anyway, there's nothing really as dramatic or exciting as the news sources we've seen seem to think. So the trust is private, and it will remain private unless there's litigation, which there could be, who knows? But because the estate is below $50,000, there's not even going to be any further court action unless, something's probably got to get completed in that little informal probate, but that's not going to be very interesting either. So, okay. Anything else, Jessica, you wanted to add to this conversation?
I mean, I'm just hoping that whatever source has the will allegedly or has the trust, eventually will get to take a peek at it. Until then, we're really just speculating.
Yeah, but isn't that fun?
It
is. Okay. So if there's further developments in the Gene Hackman case, you know where to come to find out about them. For sure, we're going to A, tell you about it, and B, pick it apart so that it really makes sense. We hope you learned something here today about good estate planning and that none of this is very surprising for our frequent listeners. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to connecting with you next time.
Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Absolute Trust Talk Live. If you enjoyed listening in, then don't forget to subscribe. You can find us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you may listen by searching Absolute Trust Talk. While you're there, we would also love for you to leave us a review. And then why not share your favorite episodes with family, friends, or colleagues too? You can find all of our shows and corresponding show notes by visiting absolutetrustcounsel.com. You'll also find a variety of other free resources, including our ebooks, videos, blogs, presentations, and more. If you need help with your estate planning or administration, we also offer a free discovery call to help get the process started. You can find more information on booking your session by visiting absolutetrustcounsel.com/scheduling. If you join us for the broadcast, you can submit questions during the show. But if not, don't worry. You can always get in touch with us by sending a quick message to info@absolutetrustcounsel.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you soon.
This podcast is not meant to take the place of legal advice from an attorney and does not create an attorney-client relationship. If you do have a legal question or issue, please consult with an attorney.